Hi, this is Mark Newman, Chief Analyst at TM Forum. Delighted to be sitting down today with Apostolos Kallis from Etiya. Apostolos, a good friend of TM Forum, someone that I certainly work with regularly over the years. So good afternoon to Apostolos. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mark. Nice to see you again.
So you've been in this industry, involved in digital transformation for probably 2 decades now, I guess. Um, Over that time, how have you seen customer requirements change? Thinking about this, from the perspective of a BSS vendor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you're right. I think the very term transformation is it's already it's already gone through the sell by date in terms of
Yeah.
the hype curve. There was a period more than a decade ago where I remember we were querying communication service providers all over the world, and probably 60-70% were already fairly ahead in their transformation to becoming digital service providers, right? And I think what we've discovered is that's always going to be a work in progress, because there's always um, new technologies, new customer touch points, new functionalities that traditional communication service providers are going to have to come up with in order to compete and satisfy their customers' expectations. So um, the only thing that's changed, if I look at it from a sort of BSS perspective, is that initially a lot of the focus was on transferring services to a virtualized environment. So moving towards
Yeah.
digitization in terms of moving things to the cloud. Um, then we moved towards this concept of, over the past 5 years in particular, moving lots of customer interaction touch points to become real time, AI driven, with use of chatbots and what we call digital interaction products. And that's still an ongoing process. I think today, when service providers talk about transformation, a lot of what that means from a BSS perspective is utilizing artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, with the goal of becoming ever closer to real time, personalized customer experience.
Mhm. And what I think is interesting from a BSS vendor perspective is you work with telcos in many countries, in many regions, different levels of maturity, different strategies, different approaches. And each time you're expected to sort of deliver capabilities which meet their own particular requirements. I mean, how do what's your recipe for success, if you like, for meeting all of those different requirements from different operators in different countries with different strategies?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's recognizing that there's no one size fits all, right? So you do need to have a different approach from a go-to-market point of view, from a pricing point of view, from a
Yeah.
product features point of view, depending on the specific region that you're focused on. There are customers that have very high ARPU. If I look at places like North America, parts of Western Europe, but a fairly smaller customer base. And then you have other developing markets in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in parts of Africa, where you have, millions and millions of subscribers, but very low ARPU. So those different sort of customers will have different priorities in terms of what they need to tackle first, and how they approach the market from a customer onboarding point of view. Um, and that certainly dictates what our approach needs to be, so as to be successful in each of those distinct markets. So a very important first step is recognizing that you need to have a different approach. Sometimes you need to have very different pricing. and different go-to-market strategies for each market. And the closer to you are to those nuances, to those specific in-country characteristics, I think the more successful you can be and your customers can be in the long term.
And we've talked about 2 decades of transformation, and some of the issues are similar today to there were 20 years ago. I mean, clearly we've AI data come into the picture a bit more. I guess one of the other changes has been the proliferation of new brands. Operators have their own digital brands. There's continued growth of MVNOs, so we're seeing new MVNOs sprouting in different parts of the world. Recently seen, I think, Brazil, Nigeria open up to MVNOs, and I'm sure that's a market that you as Etiya are interested in serving. How do you see the issues for these MVNOs and building their BSS? How are there different sets of issues in place in terms of what they need to do to be successful and how you need to respond to that?
Yeah, very good question. I think, especially when you look at MVNOs, that's been a fairly hot button for lots of the BSS vendors over the last number of years. A number of companies have tried to roll out sort of simplified cloud-ready versions of their stack to address specifically this market of MVNOs and sub-brands. We as Etiya have always sort of maintained that for our experience and for our products, the priority is working with what we like to call more mature MVNOs or sub-brands. And that means typically working with B brands of established MNOs that want to launch a digital sub-brand and do so to attract new segments of the market, perhaps appeal to a different type of customer than the one that their traditional MNO arm is usually working with. And often what they seek out there is really fast time to market, really simplified onboarding, simplified offerings. There's no longer this concept of a very large, complex catalog, but rather 2 or 3 offerings. You've got voice, data, and that's it. And highly personalized sort of self-care where everything is at your fingertips as a customer, whether that's gifting, sharing, changing your plan, making modifications, getting questions, getting answers to questions in real time through this concept of sort of crowdsourced, CSRs. So those are the kind of characteristics of fairly mature, well-funded MVNOs that fit our particular ideal customer profile. But I mean, to answer your question, there are somebody told us there's over 300 MVNOs that will be launched in 2024. More than 20 of them in Africa, for example, a recently deregulated market. Yeah. Now, very few of those will actually succeed, right?
Yeah.
So as a vendor, you have to be quite careful in terms of picking the winners, right?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes these companies require very flexible payment terms. They're looking for a vendor that's going to be a partner in their endeavor to win market share and to become established. Beyond the sort of obvious thing of choosing the right technical partner, such as Etiya, the big challenge I think for these companies will come down to how aggressive and smart their marketing and market positioning is going to be, because that's the real differentiator.
I guess the nice thing, interesting thing from a BSS vendor perspective is that this word legacy, which is why we have 20 years of transformation programs, it's not there if you're greenfield and new. So it must be fantastic for your product team to be able to use some of these new technology capabilities maybe more of a cloud-based agile model. You mentioned before, will these companies be around in 2 or 3 years' time? So an OPEX model might be more attractive. I always think it must be quite liberating for a company like Etiya to be able to to use all these capabilities that are out there today.
Obviously, it is. And I think from a delivery point of view, it makes it far simpler, which is why in most cases you need to adapt your pricing to fit that kind of simplicity and sort of very fast approach to how these companies structure themselves, what they expect from a sort of technical point of view. There isn't, mountains of complexity and integration that's required. And that's often why lots of MNOs choose to launch an MVNO, not just to win market share, but also to test bed. Could we do this? Could we move to a brand new stack? And what would the benefits of that be? How simpler is launching new products and services? How simpler is it to make changes to our pricing or add partners compared to our traditional legacy stack? So it's often a great way for established MNOs to test the waters and see what life could be like, with a brand new system in place.
Great. Well, Apostolos, I mean, it's great to hear that Etiya is on top of all of these trends and thriving in the market. So best of luck, and thanks for your time today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Mark.